Hey everyone, I'm JC, product designer and developer, and today I'm here with Toby and Ray, as always, to discuss what's latest in the MCP and MCP app world. And we're going to be looking at a really interesting app. So, why don't we do a quick intro, Toby, if you don't mind?
Sure, hi, I'm Toby. I'm CEO of Mobile Design. We're always focused on MCP things, trying to find the best ways of using them and what the latest developments are. And I'll pass it over to Ray.
Hi, and I'm Ray Deck. I'm founder over at State Change AI, where we do masterminds on the hardest parts of working with and for AI. And I'm super excited to be here to talk more about MCP apps. What do you got for us, JC?
Awesome. So today I have a very interesting app that I happen to love as well, because it's an app that allows me to search and find relevant trails around me. So that is AllTrails, and I use it quite a lot to find things around me in Barcelona where I live. So today I wanted to give it a go and see how the ChatGPT app version of it is behaving today. So I'm gonna do a quick, and before we get into testing the actual app, I wanted to remind ourselves of the framework that we've been working with in the last weeks when we're looking at ChatGPT or MCP apps, right? So the way we tend to look at these new products is through this lens, the main modes of work lens. So this framework allows us to put in the head of the user and divide the product experience, the app experience, into different stages. So that helps us understand a bit better what needs to happen or what I would experience would be for each of the moments or modes of work the user is in. So just a quick refresher here. We have the first mode, which is the exploratory mode, the explore mode. This is where the user doesn't know what they want yet, and they are testing the waters. They might be asking something to in this case, ChatGPT. And then we have constraint mode. The user is a bit more opinionated about what they want. Here are my rules. Give me X or Y products or pieces of clothing based on my preferences. Then they usually go into the compare mode. So this is where the user tries to get some help from the app or ChatGPT to help them decide, right? So they're looking to see some different options. Then they usually go into create or commit or both. So create again is, hey, do something for me, create an artifact for me. So we've seen these examples of this in Canva or Figma or even Spotify when I want to create a playlist or a design. Then there's the commit, which might be might be accompanied by might come after create, which is we've seen an example of this where I want to, for example, commit to making a booking, a reservation. So right now, not all of these UX checkpoints are fully working in the apps that we've seen, but this is the mode of work of the user at this point. And then we have a defer mode, which is, as we are understanding, is the last mode of the user where they want to take whatever they have experienced so far in the app somewhere else. So that might be saving the progress for later. That might be, for example, deploying something, the artifact, like a lovable website or a Figma design into another part of the product ecosystem, like desktop app or similar. So this is how we are defining the different modes of work the users are going through when interacting with the MCP or ChatGPT app. And now, if we try to take this into today's app, which is AllTrails, we're going to start in the exploratory mode, right? So this is first thing that we care about. So what I'm going to do is I want to see some trails around me. So I live in Barcelona. I want to see some trails around Barcelona. So show me some hiking trails in Barcelona. And then at this point, again, some of the apps that we've seen, they usually lead with the LLM basically deciding or displaying some information. Some other apps, they go and basically display the UI widget right away, which is what we're seeing right now with AllTrails. I think it really depends on the use case. It might make sense to do one or the other, but what we are seeing now in AllTrails is they lead with the UI. I think that makes sense because I'm looking for a visual representation of the output that I'm looking for, right? So that is trails around the city that I live in. So I think the benefit of having a map is a clear one here in this case. So then we have our usual carousel of options, right? So far might be, yeah, I think this might be an expected output. And I think where it really shines for me and it really presents a way different and new method of a new UX pattern is when I go and try to expand on this, right? So what this tells me, I'm still in exploratory mode, but what this does for me is it basically changes from a chat widget. So we're seeing our inline widget here. It changes that experience of a chat experience into a full product experience. So right now, I'm no longer, or it feels less of a chat experience and more of a, let's say, traditional web experience. So here we see different things happening. So we reviewed some of these patterns also in a previous episode with Tonita ChatGPT app, but I think it's a pattern that we see emerging, and it's really interesting. We see that the chat input is delegated to almost a secondary scene, and then we have the full screen showing us a list, and then a map that you can interact with. And then if we try to go into the detail of one of these trails, we see the detail page being surfaced here on the right. So we have a clear, let's say, I would say like a clear and traditional information architecture here. The interesting part is one, the CTAs here, they still take me to, well, they punch me out to the website. So any of this, they do that for me, which again, we're sure this will evolve as more protocols are available. But this is interesting because now I'm experiencing a whole different product right now. And if I try to decide to continue my experience from here, from the chat, again, the chat is still the center of the action, right? There are certain actions that I can take here, like going from a list into a detailed view, but the chat is what allows me to fully interact with what's being displayed on the screen. So that is, even if we see a traditional UI here, an interaction, this remains the main actor. So another interesting thing that happens is if I try to say, well, I live near here, right? So I want to see trails near Sands, which is my neighborhood. So what happens now is, again, at this point I would expect this full screen to change, which it did, and that's really good. I've seen this happening like not in a consistent way, so sometimes it changes, sometimes it doesn't. But now, the first interesting thing is that it changes the whole UI that gets displayed, and I do that through the chat. So that still remains true to the intent of a ChatGPT app.
Can you filter further down? Can you say, give me something of a certain distance? Let's say, give me something under 10 miles. So we'll only pick the first one. So we're going to let you kind of constrain it further to use your framework.
Yeah, let's try to constrain it a bit further, under 10 miles. So, and here's maybe the confusing part. So, well, it doesn't seem to update the full
Yeah,
screen mode.
it's not done that.
So I don't know why sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. I couldn't see a clear pattern.
I've seen that before. When you get into the full screen mode, it doesn't, the updates you have, if it's not being used in the full screen interface, it kind of uses that pop up to try and output the text instead. And I don't know if that's a
interesting.
limitation on the UI or if it's a limitation in how the full screen works, but it kind of breaks things a little bit. It's not quite as fluid I think it's not supported fully.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
you put your finger on it, Toby. That this looks like a bug to me.
Yeah.
And so that's something for us all to remember, that like when we're working with this tech, that we are dealing with a moving target in terms of how well or how
Well, I mean,
feature supported.
I think one of the things it shows actually is that there's a lot of complexity because effectively the user interface is kind of exploded into ChatGPT. It makes it quite hard to look for all the different ways of operating and to test
Yes.
them. Some things that people may not have thought of can be done because you can flip between these different modes, and you need to make sure that whatever actions they do can be accounted for properly without breaking the experience. So, I think there's definitely some tooling that's needed or some ways of helping people to manage this sort of stuff, because I think it is a problem to make sure you don't miss something.
I'm also noticing a couple things that I'm looking at this, like the you were describing this as being more like a full app, and from a scale point of view, that's true. But like from a functionality point, it still seems to be it's just a bigger version of the widget from a complexity point of view. But the layout changes. I think there's a neat lesson for people who are paying attention to UX, that like like when you start working with these MCP apps, carousels become like the very common way of expressing a list of stuff. And the reason for that is, since you have vertically scrolling chat, right, trying to implement something that like supports scrolling when you're inside the chat runs the risk of just scrolling the chat as opposed to scrolling your widget, and which is a classic problem of having scrollable viewports, right? And the way we've been seeing people solve it is you go from left to right, things that scrolled from left to right. I think like the Udemy app we looked at was sort of an exception to that, and actually we ran into a couple problems where it done like scrolling away when we were not handling that right. But horizontal scrolling is actually a little bit non-intuitive and doesn't work super well, particularly in a desktop environment, because mice are usually set to scroll just vertically, right? But when you go into full screen mode, look at the way it flips, right? You go from the carousel that's across the bottom because of that horizontal scrolling constraint to just a list over on the left. Partially because you've got more real estate because of the aspect ratio, right, of the view here. And I think there's a lesson here for people who are thinking about their MCP apps, of like, how do you do the layout when you are in widget mode versus how do you do the layout when you are in full screen mode, right? And there's like a third mode that's picture-in-picture mode, but that only appears on the desktop and sort of a little bit weirdly set up. Like on the mobile, it's really only these two. And I'm looking at it like, okay, this is neat. Like you think differently. It's a little bit like responsive, except it's actually very much like responsive, right? There's like one form factor which you want to do X layout, another form factor which has a different set of rules, you do Y layout, and that makes a lot of sense. And like as minor a thing as it is, it's definitely something that keeps people immersed in the app. Right. And I think this gets a little bit to like Toby's thing of like what feels like being in an app versus what feels like being in the little widget, and how you can be doing better in each of those two. And then, the problem that like, the integration with ChatGPT, at least in this case, doesn't seem to be quite perfect. Right. To your point, like typing the stuff in isn't really creating the feedback is something that will get fixed. Right. They will improve on that. So like we just sort of, as we're analyzing the stuff, separate the question of what's a bug, right? And we sort of expect that next week we're not talking about the same thing, and what's more structural, so we can think about that in terms of what drives better practices.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be lovely. I'd really like to see. I mean, you're right. What's interesting for me is that we're seeing the same patterns again and again. Like with full screen, scroll to the left, on the And within the text, you've got scrolling left and right. Yeah, I'd love to see people doing some more interesting things with this. I mean, obviously these are easy patterns, but there's got to be other ways you could, you have that iframe where you can do pretty much whatever you want to it. So there should be more interesting things people come up with to try and work with the different modes of operation to kind of engage better than just having the same kind of layout all the time. I mean, to be fair, AllTrails is one of the better ones of what we've seen so far, but it would be nice to see people come up with new stuff.
Right. And I think it's also worth remembering that like maps are a natural fit for the ChatGPT app mode because they are intrinsically, high dimensional, they are dense, which goes with the density of the text. They you can interact with them in a way that's very intuitive, and at the same time is not compatible with the way that you do it in text. Right, trying to say let's go just a little bit more north is a little kind of wonky when doing it through text. Whereas you can just use pinch zoom your way all the way around with this with this map view to get to exactly what you are looking for. And maps are people's eyes get drawn to maps, right? They become very attractive. And I kind of wonder, and my understanding is that like a lot of the companies that are doing, they're making some money in the world of ChatGPT apps are real estate apps. And like that links naturally to the, being map oriented and a map value add. And that because they can provide that kind of value add, that then can lead more directly to a transaction, right? Like, oh, wait, I found this trail, I found this, resort, I found this hotel, whatever. I can now click it. And now it's about then the execution, right? That probably is taking me out of ChatGPT into the reservation system. But I've been able to select it as a result of having this, having this rich interactivity. So the reason I bring it up is that I think maps are super useful. And I think that they are sort of an obvious fit. And that was one of the most compelling parts of like the OpenAI presentation when they're doing that back in October.
Yeah.
What are the things that aren't maps that are going to be super high value is the thing I'm looking for.
Yeah, definitely. Interesting points. Also, I think maps, as you're saying, they really tie to the top layer of the three first modes of work, and that's where we are seeing the best ChatGPT apps are delivering. I would experience, right? Like with when you're searching a map for real estate or for a trail, you are exploring, constraining, and comparing. And this is where a map or in this case, a view like this, it really becomes valuable. And then another thing that is interesting when I'm looking at this and thinking through this is that the chat here, it basically becomes a sort of an intelligent search rather than intelligent search bar, rather than to refine your, so as we're saying, to constrain and compare further, rather than your traditional chat interface. It becomes like delegated to a second, almost to the background, and fulfills a very specific function, which is, okay, let's refine, so let's constrain, or let's compare certain options. What I wonder about is, as these apps become more and more rich in terms of features and UX, what we will see, will we see a point where basically the chat stops being relevant and just the UI is the main character?
So it's an interesting question because for me, what I would love to see is kind of like them deconstructing this further. I don't really care about the map they bring up. The core of this, I think from AllTrails, is the trails themselves. What would be great to have is like almost maybe another app which is just the map that took data from these different places. Because it'd be cool to say, okay, show me a trail from Sands and then put my favorite coffee shops on top so I can see where I should stop on the way around. So AllTrail provides the data from the trail, someone else provides the coffee shops, and then someone then provides a map to bring all together. So almost like the thing where this really unlocks is when people stop trying to do too much themselves, but figure out a way to provide the value that then works with other value. And I think that's the thing we haven't really got to yet. Lots of these people are doing bits of it, but the problem is so much of it is, okay, press this button to go into my website so that you can log in and pay my subscription so I can use it. And actually, what we need to, I feel like there's probably wisdom in place for that. But I feel like where it gets really interesting is when people say, okay, I'll give you a trail. It costs you 5 cents to get the trail listed. And, all these microtransactions or something, so they can get paid for it. But it's then combined with other data, or there's some way of combining with the data. So we're not having to limited to just each of what they're trying to offer you. I think it gets much more powerful when you can start combining.
That makes a really good point that like as these things compose, you wind up with, MCPs or data sources, but they don't even have to be MCPs at that point, right? It's just web research with what you're talking about, Toby.
Yeah.
Right. You need to have the asset is over on the cloud. They use a web research tool to go find your stuff, and then they're just putting it up on a map. And I think the point you're really getting at here is that this whole app gets disintermediated, right? Because ChatGPT and or Claude are going to have their own map component that will just spin up when you start asking geographic questions. And we should probably expect that to come down the way. So instead of everybody having their own little map app, you will wind up with the one. And to your point, that allows you to combine a bunch of different data points, but also probably means you lose a lot of control of the experience. And that's also a lesson, I think, for people who are working within these or building these experiences is, you're not going to have nearly as much control over your customer when they're using these things because of that, compositional aspect. Well,
if you want to get the benefit from it, you have to let that go, right? Otherwise, you're not.
Oh yes, right. Well, it's about how you need to think about it, right? Like it's not like, oh no, I lose that control. How do I get that control back? You don't get that control back. You just need to live in a new world where they are frankly, they and other vendors of yours are more in control. Just as like they had to conform to web standards previously, or you had to live with Facebook's rules or whatever, and now you just have a different environment that you need to, and the rules are still being written, right? And so we're all trying to figure out like what these things are going to look like, including, by the way, our friends over at OpenAI and Anthropic are trying to figure out what the rules of the road are going to be.
Yeah. But I did have the idea, maybe we should build an MCP app that displays maps and just give you components. That would be a cool thing to have. So you can start to put it together.
And then like just gather the place from it, and then like, hey, be able to show what you are. Yeah, that could change things quite a bit. And then it wouldn't be as feature full, but that's kind of the idea, right? The idea is to give people more control over their experiences.
It's basically applying the Linux approach of lots of very small applications that work well together to apps. So you just have components or widgets that kind of applets that kind of fit. I don't know what one word is, but doing less and now we can compose things together is the key thing, I think, or we'll certainly unlock a lot of functionality.
Super cool.
Really interesting stuff.
Yeah. I was just going to ask, JC, how does one, I mean, just in terms of like closing the loop on this particular app, and then I think probably need to wrap it up. How do you, once you've seen these things, we've been doing the exploration, what comes next for you? Like how do you then, execute on your intent to go hiking or what have you? Is there like more software to it? Is like once you've seen it, like at that point you're just sort of talking to your friends, it's completely out of band. How does the commitment, right, part work when you're looking at hiking and using the app for that?
Right. So if we look at AllTrails, basically value proposition is you're not creating, I mean, there are certain ways to create, but you're not creating, you're committing, as you said, right? So I'm committing to basically choosing a trail. In this case, what happens is, let's say this is the one I wanna go for. What happens right now in the ChatGPT app is that I can only save. That's the only CTA that I can see. That's my commitment, right? And it also serves as the defer mode, last mode of work. So I want to save this, and what happens is, as we saw, it punches me out to the website where I can continue the experience as we've seen many times before in these new apps. So from here, I would need to log in and then basically save it. So this is what happens today in the app. What would be, I think, a way more interesting choice here is that it would allow me to even preview this this route in the map. I think that would already help me with my commitment, let's say, goal. And from there, I would be way more convinced into actually trusting and say, okay, let me save that wherever that is. Maybe that's on the website or on
I
the
think
app if I have it
and
installed.
there is a reason for that. My guess is they don't want to do that is because it would mean that they'd have to provide the MCP with the actual location data to actually draw that route, which would then mean people could take it. Because although the route's displayed, it's displayed as an image in the bottom right. And to put it into the map, they'd have to actually put the coordinates there, which
Yep.
is the core part of what they're offering. So effectively, what they're trying to say is you have to go to the app to get those coordinates. I mean, the core value of this is those coordinates. The coordinates of the route is what they're selling. And so they can't give that away unless you log in or get some value from it. And I think that's kind of gets to the core of why all these problems come from, is because for this value to get to that value, to make it useful in the map, they'd have to give away what they're trying to sell. So it's kind of a tricky problem that people have. And I guess this comes back to maybe using the sort of protected data thing, maybe we talked about before, Ray. But yeah,
Yep.
it's got to be. This is where I agree. I think there's a lot more value if you could put on the main map, but I think it's a sort of value issue, which is what's preventing that rather than a technical issue.
Yeah, I think it's not going to be different from whatever they decide today to do on web, right? Like if you go to the website or if you look for trails in Barcelona, they make a decision of basically surfacing the same information we're seeing here, like a preview or snapshot of the route. But then they do have, so they do give you, like
Well, they
the
do show
preview
it to you here, actually. Yeah,
on the
yeah,
map.
that's true. They do. Yeah, okay, fair play.
So maybe there's like, and then there's all these tactics that I think, I mean, this can be easily a whole series of episodes where we look at the growth tactics that these companies and developers they start doing
Yep.
in ChatGPT. But yeah, so I think there are a lot of improvements that we are seeing with this UI and the whole interaction with the chat. It is very neat. It is very usable. There are still a lot of opportunities that will come, as Ray was saying, as the rules are being written. We'll see more of this shaping up, and we'll try to be here learning about this and trying to comment on that.
Absolutely.
Nice.
So
Look forward to doing it again.
thank you guys. See you in the next
Thanks,
one.
guys.
See you
Thanks,
soon.
man.
Bye bye.